the chairman of UKIP, Steve Crowther, who's in our Westminster studio. Good evening. What do you make of this Sunderland result, then? 25 to 30% UKIP vote.
Well, it's extremely encouraging. A very good start to the evening. As you pointed out, not somewhere where we've had a strong performance before. In the northeast, an area that we're looking to build, and I think that's a very, very solid start.
What are you going to say to the refrain, which will be constant tonight, that you won't win any councillors there, let alone an MP at a general election? In other words, UKIP is a kind of protest from the voters.
Well, I think it's hard to continue to make that point. What we're seeing in the county council elections last year, all of our performances were between 19.5% and 26.2% right across the country where we stood. And I think the point here is that this isn't just simply a big protest. It's a very consistent amount of the voting public that is now moving to UKIP on a consistent basis. And what that does is it tells the voting public that if you vote UKIP, you have, you are amassing, you are in good company. And I think we're going to see higher figures than this during the course of this evening. And I feel sure that, like last year, we will see some good results, some good councillors elected, and our county councillors have had quite an effect in quite a number of councils since they were elected last year. So I'm not expecting this to be just some sort of ballast vote. This is, really changing the shape of politics. Stay
with us, and I'll bring in our guests here in the studio, because I'm sure you'd like to hear what the three parties that are being damaged by UKIP have to say about this result in Sunderland. We're joined here by, for the Liberal Democrats, Lynn Featherstone, who's an International Development Minister, for the Conservatives by their chairman, Grant Shapps, and then beside him, Labour's Shadow Business Secretary, Chuka Umunna. So which one of you would like to start on this threat to all three of you? Chuka, you begin on it. It's Sunderland.
Well,
you didn't expect UKIP to do anything there, did you?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, this isn't the first time we've seen UKIP showing presence in the northeast. They did not badly in South Shields, I think also in Rotherham and other parts of the north. But undoubtedly, we're in an era of four-party politics.
The Liberal Democrats have done really, really bad, been wiped out pretty well in Sunderland by UKIP.
Not our finest result ever.
Not your finest result.
Not our finest result. But I think, talking about what you were talking about, is that the reason UKIP have had such amazing success, or such a rapid rise, partly what Chuka says about being a repository, but I think they've also managed to sound like human beings, and I think that's Nigel Farage's big win. And I think all of us have gotten to the point where we are so guarded, we are so on message, that we seem to have lost some of our humanity.
Grant Shapps.
Early days from one partial result, of course.
Interesting result.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think tonight will be interesting to see. I imagine voters will have sent a clear message and will want to see what they've had to say. I think in the end, the answer is that we need to make sure that we're delivering a long-term plan, that we're actually solving the problems in this country.
Bring you back in, Steve Crowther. Talk of a pact already. Douglas Carswell saying you and the Tories should get together.
I think talks of pacts are entirely inappropriate. Could I just say, I think that Lynn Featherstone actually really did put her finger on something. It's the experience that we've been having on the doorsteps, and I've been going around the doorsteps myself, and the constant refrain from people is, I'm voting for you because I like the fact that you say what you mean, you say things that other politicians don't say, and you just speak straightforwardly. And that, I think, is something that undoubtedly is causing people to vote UKIP. And what's happened over this campaign is that a lot of effort has been put into trying to channel UKIP's message back into the straitjacket of the normal way of political speaking. And it has failed, and it has consistently backfired, actually.
The experts in these matters say that if they get up towards 100, 80 seats, 100, then they're doing very well tonight.
Now, let me show you just a small bit of evidence which suggests there may be a change going on. We're looking here at the last European elections in 2009, and these are all UKIP voters here, and they voted for UKIP in the European elections, but then they're asked, how are you going to vote when the general election comes? And the figure's quite poor for UKIP, 6% only say they will stay with the party. Most of them, greater majority than any other column here, 44%, Conservative is how they're going to vote. So they're going to drift from UKIP to the Conservatives and a small number to Labour and the Liberal Democrat and the others. This is now changing this graph. The reading was taken again for these European elections, and let's have a look. Let's see how resilient UKIP's vote is this year. So again, these are UKIP voters in the European elections which we just had. 58% of them now say they will vote UKIP in the general election.
Nick's just got news in from Hull.
Well,
I'd like to just bring in John Curtis in a moment, if I may.
We were talking about the possibility that UKIP would amass votes in the north as a rival to Labour, but not win seats. Well, they have won a seat. Not officially, it's not confirmed yet, but according to the former Labour Lord Mayor David Gemmell told the Hull Daily Mail that he's lost his seat and he's lost it to UKIP. UKIP, once they have this presence around the country, will start to be a living and breathing political organisation, and that will change them as well.
Steve Crowther, you heard that. Do you go to Nigel Farage and say, what we do today?
No, we don't, actually, no. We are a very democratic organisation, and I love the one-man band argument. There's a very strong group of people behind Nigel, and we are an extremely democratic organisation.
Steve Crowther, can I just give you an example? I asked Mr Farage on the campaign trail the other day, are you in favour of privatising the NHS, I asked. No, we're not, he said, but we haven't developed our policy on the NHS yet.
Well, I think you're misinterpreting what he said. I think the point was he said we haven't developed our policy. Our policy is being developed by expert groups, and that includes experts within our membership. That's how our policy develops. It builds through using the expertise that exists within our membership. You know, Nigel will express an opinion, Paul Nuttall will express an opinion. That doesn't mean to say that either of them is actually putting an imprimatur that says that this is our policy.
But you will, you'd accept what Nigel Farage said, that the manifesto you had at the last general election was rubbish, and he said he never read it, and it's all been torn up, and you've got to start from scratch. That's pretty well the case, isn't it?
All parties start from scratch. I mean, the difficulty we've had is that we had a very extensive manifesto at the last general election, and it was an extraordinarily big piece of work. And like any
I remember
other party,
nobody read it. Your party leader hadn't read it.
Well, I read
hadn't read it. Oh, you read it?
I did.
I won't catechise you on it. But so you read all the stuff about taxi drivers in uniform and repainting the trains and all that?
Yes, that's the burden of the chairman.
and you were behind it all, of course. Now you're dismayed that it's all been taken away from you. You ought to start again. Anyway,
well,
but do you accept that if you have councillors in these places, it does alter? The more councillors you have, the more you're trying to present yourself as a party for Westminster, the tougher the game gets.
Well, in some ways, but then also in some ways the easier it gets, because we're putting roots down into communities. People are seeing us in action on the ground domestically. And I think that's the point. The spike in Jeremy Vine's graph, the 23% spike at the end here, wasn't another European election. It was domestic first past the post. And that's the big change. All of this really started to change for us in February last year at Eastleigh, where we won on the day. And suddenly people were able to see that UKIP really is a viable vote in a domestic first past the post.
We won on the day, meaning we won if you exclude the postal votes.
Yes.
Yeah. OK, well, let's go to Hull now, because that is one of the places where you've had a gain reported. Tim Iredale is up there. Tim, tell us the story in Hull tonight.
Yes, we're awaiting the first formal declarations of results here in Hull. But already in the counting room, next door to where I'm standing right now, there are plenty of worried Labour faces, because Labour know they have lost a number of votes and indeed a number of seats to UKIP tonight. In the last few minutes, a former Lord Mayor of Hull, who served as a Labour councillor here for the past 26 years, has conceded defeat to UKIP.
I saw Nigel Farage speaking at public meetings in both Portsmouth and Eastleigh. I say Eastleigh is much more organised after the by-election for UKIP. They're both Lib Dem strongholds, but here at Portsmouth it does feel like UKIP is making quite an impact already. We've not had any results declared, but the Labour group leader said to me it's causing mayhem with their usual predictions. There's a sort of a side story with Mike Hancock, the MP for Portsmouth South, who is also a councillor and who was suspended by the party. The Lib Dems didn't run against him. It looks like UKIP might have taken that seat here with a considerable vote.
I think if you look at the results that are coming through, the small c Conservative faction in British politics is picking up a very large share of votes.
And what do you make of Jacob Rees-Mogg's generous offer to have a pact with UKIP? Would UKIP like that? Would UKIP like it?
I'm sorry, but I'm sitting here saying, thinking, well, it must be fun for you all to be carving us up, but it's all too late. The Labour Party has treated us with amused contempt for many years because they thought that we were simply just an irritant to the Conservatives. They now discover that we're actually representing increasing and very large numbers of their own core vote that they've been taking for granted for many years. So they're calling us names and inventing ludicrous policy manifestos and ascribing them to us. And the Conservatives have now suddenly decided that they're massively Eurosceptic, and we're just naughty ex-Conservatives who've got to be made to come and sit on the naughty step for a bit. I mean, this is just ridiculous. We've been going for 20 years, and we've had steady progress, and we are now in a position where, as you can see from the early results tonight and from what's been happening over the last 12 months, UKIP is really resonating with the voting public in this country. It's not an accident. It is because we have been telling it like it is, and not playing these silly games about who's going to do pacts with who. And we're here to stay, I'm afraid, and you both have to get used to it.
And if you found that the result of your staying was that you split the, what Jacob Rees-Mogg called the small c Conservative vote, and therefore let Labour in, that would be something you could live with?
Look, we are an independent political party with our own stance and our own manifesto that we're working on, and is not going to be, incidentally, just invented by Sugar Amuna and his people. You know, we're not here to be bargained out of existence. That small c conservatism, you know, it applies across the board. We have huge numbers of people who vote for us now, who are lifelong Labour voters who've never dreamed of voting Conservative. So, you know, we're not here just to be bought and sold. We are here representing an increasing number of people in this country.
Where I think Jacob is wrong, and to some extent I think the UKIP chair is right, is that he's presupposing that the main reason that people are going to vote for UKIP is purely the EU. Now, Lynn's right on that. You can't out-UKIP on that. No matter how much you tried, it hasn't worked. But people are voting for UKIP for a range of different reasons.
The way to get promoted in the Conservative Party is to say as little as possible and not draw any attention to what you're saying, and then you're guaranteed for promotion.
This is now starting to get really fascinating if I show you this. If you look at the key wards that we're focusing on, Labour are on 40%. Now, there's a rider that I have to give him. More than half the seats so far that have come in have been Labour tinted. So you would tend to see quite a high figure there. But the remarkable figure here is the 28% for UKIP. 21% for the Conservatives. Not very good at all so far. These figures will change through the night, no doubt, as we get more and more wards in. We haven't got that many so far. 8% for the Liberal Democrats only. The Greens on 2, BNP on 0, and the others on 1%. So at every turn where we analyse figures coming in, we're seeing something remarkable happening with UKIP here.
Let's hear more news. Andrew Sinclair is in Basildon, our political correspondent. Conservative-held council, of course, where UKIP are making some gains. And are they going to unseat the Tories?
It looks as if they are, David. We came here because we're expecting to see some Labour gains tonight. So far, all the gains tonight have been from UKIP. We've had 5 so far. They've taken 3 seats from the Tories, 1 from Labour, 1 from the Liberal Democrats. We think they're about to take another one from the Tories, and if that is the case, that'll put this authority into no overall control. And it's a similar picture which we're seeing in other parts of Essex tonight. Southend has gone into no overall control from Conservative, and that was partly due to UKIP making 5 gains. Castle Point has gone into no overall control. There, UKIP took the seat of the council leader. And all over East Anglia tonight, we're hearing stories about UKIP making notable gains. In Peterborough, where they're still counting, they've already taken 3 seats tonight. UKIP are confidently talking about possibly taking a seat in Ipswich, up in Suffolk later on this evening. They're also very excited about Great Yarmouth in Norfolk, which counts tomorrow.
Let's see one of the fresh faces of UKIP from our Croydon centre, Winston McKenzie. Croydon candidate is there. Good evening, Mr. Mackenzie. You called Croydon a dump yesterday.
How you doing, David?
What? Hi there. Why do you think Croydon's a dump?
I've lived in Croydon ever since I was 5 years old. I came to this country, my parents worked hard, and I've watched Croydon grow and grow and grow. And over the years, the people of Croydon have been deceived, disenfranchised by their local governments. And the UKIP fox came along, and feathers are rustling tonight. There are feathers everywhere. They fail to reach the wider community, and it will always be that way. Tonight, you're seeing the beginning of something absolutely phenomenal, David, because people from Labour, Conservatives, not to mention the nondescript Liberal Democrats, the Greens don't even come into it. They're all learning a very harsh lesson. Nigel Farage has led his party to something absolutely fantastic. What a great leader. And it's this type of leadership that this country needs today. And if you're British, whether you be black, white, yellow or pink, you've got to get out there. You've got to get out there and defend this country and all that it stands for. All that it stands for. You asked me why I thought Croydon had become a dump. It's simply because the people have been disenfranchised. It's not just immigration, David. What's happened is there's been this massive drive about racism. And the word racism has been demeaned and diminished. When it's used now, it doesn't mean a single thing. Because certain sections of the press, together with the coalition, have used it as a political weapon. They've played the race card 100%.
How do you mean? How do you mean? In what way have they done that? In what way have they done that?
They've used they've turned around and said that UKIP are racist. Now, I'd like to know, whenever did an Englishman have to fight against the colour of his skin? Now, I'm a black man and I'm proud. But the simple fact is, the media have turned around and said, that man is black, you can't call him black. And now we have a situation whereby the word racism means nothing. So the media, together with the three main parties, have used this race card to trick, to fool and condemn the people into believing that our party is a racist party. Our leader, Nigel Farage, is a Christian man.
Okay.
And why would I be involved with a bunch of racists? All you can hear, David, is UKIP, UKIP, UKIP. This party and its leader have changed the face of British politics. And these guys sitting back, they keep coming with this rhetoric that one day everyone will change their minds and return to the status quo. Well, the status quo is no more. Guys, you need to wake up. You need to wake up. It's all gone wrong. It's a disaster. Labour have lost votes. The Conservatives have lost votes. And no one seems to want to know the truth. Some people, David, they just like to live a lie. They live a lie.
Mr. Mackenzie, thank you.
They don't want to face the truth.
Thank you very much indeed.
UKIP certainly had the best of the night here in Rotherham. They took votes right across the board. They took votes from us, but they took votes and seats from the Conservatives. The Lib Dem vote collapsed. And then they also took votes from people who'd not voted for some time.
This is an extraordinary evening. We've never seen anything like this in our political lifetimes, at least not in mine. And yes, I think the Conservatives have to be realistic that, on balance, this may be that we would expect UKIP to be more of a challenge to us than the other parties. Though what is interesting tonight, I mean, for example, in my hometown of Colchester, it's the Liberal Democrats who are losing seats to UKIP. Here in Basildon, where I'm speaking from, it's the Labour Party that are losing seats to UKIP. I mean, the Conservatives who are losing seats to UKIP here, because Labour isn't taking those seats that they should be. So I think there's one very strong story coming out of this evening, which is that UKIP are replacing the challenge that the Labour Party should be making to an incumbent government.
Have you been affected by the rise of UKIP like the other three parties, do you think?
No, I think there's a vanishingly small number of people considering whether to vote UKIP or Green. What we're seeing is we really are picking up those disaffected Lib Dems in particular, and I think that really is one of the stories of tonight. Perhaps the focus has been on Labour, but the Lib Dem vote is really tanking.
Let's talk to Stephen Wolfe in Salford, UKIP member, spokesman on the city. Now, what's going on in London then? I know UKIP isn't meant to be strong, or is said not to be strong in London, but why aren't you strong in London?
Well, David, I'm actually now the economic spokesman. I moved on from the city a while ago.
Apologies.
No, not at all. It's early in the morning and it's been a long day for everybody.
No, but what's the difference between city and economic? They're pretty much the same sort of thing. Anyway, go on.
They're only one aspect of a very vibrant economy that we have.
Right.
And I've now got to look at a broader spectrum of creating jobs in the economy through us.
Okay.
I think London is a very different aspect of the country. It's a much more multicultural. It's a younger population as a whole. It's spread out considerably. And I think one of the things that we've had to do as a party when we were rationalising ourselves and looking at focusing on which seats to go for is how we spent a very, finite resource in terms of our funding in order to look at the areas where we think we could win. Now we are seeing, you've heard Winston early on this evening, and there are plenty of candidates across London. We're focusing on London, and I think you'll see progression over the next year or so in particular.
I was interested by the words you used. I mean, London is not easy for us because it's A, multicultural, and B, it's young. So you're, on the whole, biased towards white, older voters. Is that right?
Oh, David, absolutely not. I
mean, that's what you
said.
I didn't say.
No. I said that's because that's what's happening in London. It's a very different environment, and also London is a much more international city, and so there has very different focus on what type of policies they want. I mean, I would look across the country. You've got rural issues that you see that the Conservatives are focused on in particular, and we've got city issues which are very different in the north. In the north of England, there is still a huge amount of poverty, particularly in the way that the wages have been decreased. We're looking at high energy costs up there. So we've had to look at the issues on the ground there which affect those people. London is a different dynamic, and I think everybody accepts that it's an international city, probably the truly greatest international city. And so there are very different issues to consider.
All right. It's known that, I mean, I think Nigel Farage accepts that you don't have policies at the moment of the kind you can put forward in a year from now. What are the economic policies that you're working on that are going to be put to the electorate on behalf of UKIP in just over 11 months' time?
Well, like most of the parties, we are in a current process of reviewing the economic policies that we have. We've only announced a couple so far. One is obviously clearly that we would like to see the minimum wage, those would not pay any tax on that, and we're certainly considering the period where those were paying increases in tax in the 40% range. So that should be raised considerably, and that's been actually announced by us for some time. But I think when we're looking at the amount of income that we have as an economy and looking at how much we're spending, we're doing exactly what the other parties are doing. We're reviewing them, we're costing them, and then we'll actually have a very complementary and complete policy process later.
Will that involve quite extensive extra cuts in public spending? Because Nigel Farage has said he thinks the state is too big and that the coalition have been far too careful in their cuts that they've made so far.
Well, they certainly have cut in certain areas, and the state is too big is what a number of the parties have said. What we have found, though, is that if you look at just even one of the like foreign aid, for example, the amount of foreign aid is a very large part of the budget. Now, there are some parts of foreign aid that you need to spend.
It's not a large part of the nation's budget at all, is it?
No, well, the nation's budget is, roughly around 660 billion income, 710 billion in what we're spending.
So what's foreign aid compared with that?
7% of GDP.
Well, it's a significant part of that. GDP is slightly different, clearly. But what we're saying is that we're doing a line-by-line review of all the spending of the government departments.
OK, but just in terms of direction of travel, do you want to see bigger spending cuts than the coalition?
What I think we need to see is more accurate and sensible spending cuts, and if they mean that we cut a little bit more deeply than the Conservative Party and the coalition, that may occur, but I can't give you that particular answer at the moment because most of the policies that we're reviewing are on the table. I'm actually looking at the numbers, and I'm also having them peer reviewed. And one of the most important parts of our policy testing is having them peer reviewed.
All right. So, Stephen Wolfe, there's been a lot of talk about the UKIP's vote being spread so thinly across the country that you won't, in a first-past-the-post system, stand a chance of winning a constituency in the general election. What's the strategy to win a constituency?
Well,
or is it something that's deferred for another 5 years or indeed a decade?
No, absolutely not. The strategy you're seeing is beginning to work. If you look at Essex, if you look at the Eastern, you look at the north of England, we're beginning to win council seats, and that's because we're putting money, time, focus and energy into those areas. And where we're doing it, we're beginning to be very successful about it. And what we're finding is that the electorate has spoken. There is a real national momentum for change, and we're the party that they see can change what's happening in this country. They feel that we talk common sense about a whole range of issues, and yes, there is a feeling that the other parties have actually been the same for a number of years or just not listened to them. But when we have spoken, they've felt some common ground. They felt a real need that we can provide the answers to the solutions of the problems that they have in this country. And when we start putting our policies forward, I think many more of them will stay with us next year.
So UKIP are the voice of common sense.
Well, they don't have any policies. They don't have any policies on the economy. The only policy they really have is to pull out of Europe. And, you know, to sit there and say, oh, we're thinking about it, well, you're contesting the only nationwide election between 2010 and 2015, and you don't know what you're going to say on the economy.
So, broadside from this studio, what's your answer to it?
That's perfectly fine. What I wasn't indicating is that it's a significant part of the budget. I mentioned that we received 660 billion. What I'm saying is when you're looking at foreign aid, we look at that amount of money spent, and only some of it really needs to be spent on the real issues affecting people abroad, which is their health or illnesses. Some of it is being spent very, very badly indeed. But what we're doing is a line-by-line review. That's only one portion of that. And as I've already indicated in terms of some of the tax policies, we are rolling out some of those issues over a period of time. But none of your parties actually have your policy set for 2015. That's perfectly fair. I think that's acceptable. I also have to review it on the basis of Osborne's last budget. You changed a lot in terms of pensions. You've changed a lot in terms of business rates, and we have to take that into consideration as well. And of course, there are issues about tax. There's issues about energy. But my main point about it is that when the people were saying, we want changes in this economy, we want you as political parties to change, you didn't listen. And we are listening, and that's what we're taking into our policies in the future.
All right. Patrick O'Flynn, could I start with you? You heard a reporter there saying that you've now got to do pretty well, or you're expecting to do pretty well on Sunday with the European elections. Do you think this means you're going to come out top?
Well, the bookmakers seem to place us as strong favourites. I'm always wary of saying hubristic things before the actual result comes out. It certainly looks very promising. I was expecting us to get... or am expecting us to get a higher share of the vote in the Europeans than in these locals. I haven't yet seen a projected national share in these, but in any event, we're optimistic and it looks good.
Yeah, we haven't done our projected national share yet. We'll do it later on in the afternoon when we've got enough of these key wards in, showing how the whole of the country would have voted. Well, England, I think, not Scotland, of course, where they have no elections today, or Wales. Just tell me this. We've had a lot of talk from the other parties about how you are the new dustbin, the disaffected, you don't have any policies except, you know, get out of Europe, and that it'll all wither on the vine come the general election.
Well, I think for the first thing is to say is that the other parties are very foolish to base their future expectations on that assumption. We would equally be very foolish to place ours on the idea that that can't happen. I think we're in a position where the British people are taking a look at us. They're delighted that we're offering an alternative, but we would indeed be complacent if we think we can just run round with our arms in the air singing "We Are the Champions." We have work to do on our own weaknesses, and we must further build on our strengths. And if the other parties, you know, expect us just to tamely fade away, then people like me will be working very hard over the summer to make sure that when we have our party conference up in Doncaster in South Yorkshire, one of our new strongholds, we've got some interesting things to say about the domestic agenda, which will give the British public that idea that, yes, they've given us a chance, we're taking it and we're progressing.
Thank you to everyone who voted UKIP.